I never imagined my heart would skip a beat for a cleaning lady found sleeping on a toilet. The scent of bleach and a tinge of something stale filled the cramped restroom as I glanced down at her. There she was, a frail figure slumped on the floor, a mop spilling its contents beside her. I blinked. This was the scene unfolding before me. In that moment, time froze. Her chest rose and fell in shallow breaths, the soft pitter-patter of a dying heart against the porcelain throne. I could hear my own heartbeat, thrumming in my ears, drowning out the world around us. I crouched closer, my knees pressing into the cold tiles. Were those tears pooling in the corners of her eyes? The weight of her fragile existence hung in the air. She wasn't just anyone. I remembered her smile, that warm light in the hallway. Whenever she swept by, I felt something in my chest flutter, a bizarre mix of admiration and pity. My hands trembled as I reached out, wanting to shake her awake, but fear gripped me. Where was everyone? The noise of the bustling office outside seeped through, oblivious to the tragedy unfolding. Voices raised in laughter, footsteps thumping like thunder, while here we were, alone in a world of silence. Why was she even here? 1,000 questions ricocheted in my mind. I tucked my hands beneath my thighs, fighting the urge to scream. As my pulse quickened, my imagination couldn't help but spin tales. Was she overworked, crushed under the weight of a mundane life? Or had she discovered something scandalous that led her to this very moment of defeat? My heart raced with a mixture of fear and curiosity. I could hear her whispers now, fragile strands of consciousness weaving through her dreams. "Help me," she muttered, barely audible. A chill wrapped around my spine. There was something haunting in her voice, a plea shrouded in desperation. I glanced around, half expecting someone to walk in, to put an end to this nightmare. The world outside continued to thrum with excitement, completely unaware of the fragile life in front of me. Would I scream for help? Would anyone care? I was drowning in uncertainty as I searched her face. I could almost see shadows lurking behind her closed eyelids, whispers of secrets untold. My heart sank even lower as my mind raced. What had brought her to this low point? This wasn't just a cleaning lady, this was a person who deserved to be seen. I felt a lump tightening in my throat. The urge to shake her awake became unbearable. But what if it was too late? Suddenly, the door creaked open, light flooding the tiny space. I gasped, scrambling to my feet. Was it a coworker? Would they even care? I held my breath, waiting for the judgment, for the scorn. Instead, the figure stepped back. I recognized her. She was one of the high-ranking executives, the kind of woman I feared and admired in equal measure. Is she? Her voice trailed off, eyes wide with shock. And just like that, everything shifted. The air grew thick with tension. This could unravel far worse than I had imagined. The echoes of our world collided with the fragile essence of hope I desperately clung to. Would she help her? Would we uncover the truth behind this haunting scene, or would we let it slip away, forgotten? Hey, before we continue with this amazing story, I need to give you an important heads up. Many subscribers have reported that YouTube unsubscribed them without warning. Take a quick second to check the red button below to make sure you're still subscribed to the channel. I'd hate for you to miss any of the exclusive content coming soon. And while you're there, smash that like button, it really helps me out with the algorithm. Oh, and tell me in the comments, which city are you watching from? I love getting to know every amazing person who's part of this community. Your participation makes all the difference. Let's connect. The executive's shocked expression shifted from disbelief to urgency as she rushed into the cramped restroom. I stepped back to let her in, heart racing, still unable to comprehend the gravity of the situation. The air was thick with the stench of cleaning chemicals and something far more profound, a raw vulnerability that sliced through my defenses. "Catherine." The executive leaned down, her fingers gently brushing the cleaning lady's hair away from her pale face. There was an intensity in her demeanor that sent a shiver through me. This was no ordinary moment. She knelt beside Catherine, her voice shaking with concern. "Catherine, can you hear me? Please, wake up." I watched as she pulled out her phone with quick precision, dialing for help, my heart pounding even faster. The sudden sound of sirens echoed in my mind, intertwining with the desperate whispers that lingered in the room, enveloping us in a shroud of worry. A tear escaped the corner of my eye as they both fought against the suffocating weight of despair pressing down on us, but just as I was caught in this whirlwind of emotions, a familiar voice broke through my thoughts. "What happened?" It was Mark, one of my colleagues, standing in the doorway with a confused expression, the laughter from the office fading as he took in the scene before him. "Get help," the executive barked, her authority slicing through the haze. Mark nodded and bolted down the hallway, urgency replacing disbelief, yet still, I felt the weight of uncertainty in the air. Would we lose Catherine before help even arrived? Each tick of the clock felt like a lifetime as I knelt beside them, internally pleading for her to awaken. "Stay with us, please," I whispered, unsure if my words would permeate the veil of unconsciousness encasing her. The executive gripped Catherine's hand, her own trembling as she renewed her calls, voice steadying with resolve. In that fleeting moment, I caught a glimpse of humanity. This powerful woman, usually cloaked in ambition, revealing her heart's sincere concern for someone considered beneath her station. The door swung open again, and a blur of paramedics rushed in. I stepped back, watching them with a mix of hope and dread as they immediately assessed Catherine's condition. My breath hitched, each heartbeat echoing like a countdown in my chest. Their professional demeanor contrasted sharply against the raw vulnerability of the scene, and in that juxtaposition, I felt an unexpected flicker of hope. They moved swiftly, administering care with a reassurance that eased the tight knot in my stomach. As they lifted Catherine onto a stretcher, I caught her gaze briefly, the flicker of consciousness in her eyes sent a jolt through me. "Help me," she whispered again, her voice fragile, almost disappearing like smoke. The executive nodded, her voice firm as she reassured Catherine, "You'll be okay. We're here for you." For a brief moment, they were connected by something deeper across class, background, and circumstance, two souls reaching for resilience in a fractured world. As the paramedics wheeled her out, I felt a rush of mixed emotions: relief, fear, and a touch of disappointment. I wanted to follow, to know she was going to be all right, but the executive caught my eye. "Stay here. I'll get updates when we reach the hospital." I nodded, the somber reality crashing in around me. I was left in the restroom, abandoned to the bitter scent of bleach and the echoes of an office that continued on, unaware of the small life dangling teeteringly between past and possibility. But just as I began to gather my thoughts, a commotion stirred through the hall. Voices elevated, snippets of a heated argument reaching my ears. I recognized the tones of several senior executives, each argument laced with panic over the unexpected news. Curiosity ignited in me. What were they discussing? Did they know Catherine had been found, lifeless on the floor? Was she just an employee to them, a face among many, or did they see the humanity she embodied? Stepping outside, I found the small cluster of suits who seemed oblivious to the gravity of their exchanges. Their concern seemed more entwined with image than the life they had just overlooked. My heart sank further. How could they sit here arguing while a woman was fighting for hers? One of them noticed me. "You. What do you know about that cleaning lady? Is she going to make it?" The demand was tough, the tone accusing. It struck me how they couldn't grasp what had just transpired, the fragility of life masked beneath the sheen of their polished careers. That I took a step forward, the weight of their stares igniting courage I didn't know I possessed. "She's a person, not just a cleaning lady. She deserves more than this callous manner you're treating her with. We were just trying to help her." I felt my voice growing stronger, but the crowd of suits fell silent, caught somewhere between surprise and dismay at my confrontation. In that moment, the air thickened again, charged with a new possibility. I knew I had to find Catherine and discover the truth behind her struggles, to share her story, and as I turned away, determination coursing through my veins, I couldn't shake the uneasy thought that the echoes of this office would linger far beyond today. Whatever lay ahead, would uncover the truth, for Catherine and for the many unseen souls weaving through these corporate walls. But first, I needed to find out what my colleagues were truly discussing, and the weight of their words echoed ominously in my mind, promising a revelation that could shatter everything I thought I knew. The air felt thick as the remnants of the argument faded around me, leaving only the hollow hum of fluorescent lights overhead. I took a deep breath, trying to center myself. I could still picture Catherine's wan face, the vulnerability that seemed to wrap around her like a shroud. I needed to mevito acten as I sprinted down the corridor, my mind raced with questions. Was she going to be okay? What had happened to her? And why did it feel like I might be the only one fighting for her in this callous world? I pushed through the door that led to the reception area, the clatter of keyboards and low murmur of office chatter a stark contrast to the chaos I had just witnessed. I needed information, and the closest source was the front desk, where a receptionist browsed through messages with a pensive look on her face. "Did you hear what happened?" I approached, my voice catching in my throat. The woman looked up at me, surprise evident in her eyes. "Yes, it's horrible. I heard she collapsed. They took her to St. Jude's." My heart sank at the mention of the hospital. I knew it wasn't far, but the uncertainty was suffocating. "What else did you hear? Do they know what caused it?" She hesitated, biting her lip. "Just rumors. Some say she's been unwell for a while but no one noticed. We didn't really pay attention, I guess." There was a stark confession in her tone, as if she too realized the depth of our collective neglect. "Have you seen anyone from HR?" I couldn't shake off the feeling that Catherine's plight would be swept aside, her struggles buried beneath the glossy surface of corporate proceedings. I needed to keep her in the forefront of their minds. "Not today. It's been unusually quiet on that end." The receptionist's voice turned low, almost conspiratorial. "You think they're trying to cover something up?" The question piqued my curiosity. "What do you mean?" But just then, another executive burst through the revolving door, his face a mask of urgency. He seemed caught in that space between disbelief and outrage. He was clutching a sheaf of papers. "They're going to require a full report on this incident. The board is meeting this evening," he announced, his voice crisp and laden with authority that I felt a chill run through me as I watched him stride toward the elevators. My mind spun. Why was there a meeting? In response to a medical emergency of an employee? Did they fear something deeper was at play? My instincts screamed that Catherine was more than a statistic to file away. She was a voice that had been stifled, silenced within the very walls meant to protect her. "I need to find that boardroom," I declared, feeling the gravity of my decision settle like an anchor in my chest. I had to stand up for Catherine, to ensure she wasn't just a footnote in their conversations, their meetings, their plans. The receptionist blinked in surprise. "You're really going to confront them?" "Yes," I said, steeling myself. "And you'll come too?" She looked hesitant but saw the determination in my eyes. Nodding reluctantly, she peeled herself from the desk, and together we moved toward the sterile steel and glass elevators that separated us from the inner workings of Power.as. We stood in silence waiting for the doors to open. A moment of vulnerability washed over me. Why was I putting myself on the line for a woman I hardly knew? I could be risking my job, my standing within the company. But then I realized, Catherine wasn't just a cleaning lady, she was someone's mother, sister, friend, human in every sense of the word, with a life and history all her own. With trepidation, we stepped into the boardroom, the atmosphere heavy with tension as the executives gathered around a long table, their voices rising and falling in a cacophony of concern and blame. I stood at the threshold, adrenaline roaring in my ears. Then, unexpectedly, the executive who had been with Catherine appeared from the side, her eyes locking onto mine like a lifeline. "I have news about Catherine," she announced, her voice drawing every eye in the room. My heart raced. Were we finally going to hear about her condition? Would this environment recognize her humanity? But just then, Sophie, one of the senior executives, sprinkled with authority yet colored by a sharpness of judgment, interjected. "Do we really need to discuss a cleaning lady in a board meeting?" Let's focus on what we can control. The room paused, time hung in the air, thick and uncomfortable. And with those words, I felt the reality of the barriers I was trying to break down. Every voice that sought to silence Catherine was echoing louder than ever. Before I could react, I blurted out, "You can't ignore this. She's fighting for her life, and you're worried about your image? How can you justify that?" My words ricocheted off the walls, causing more than a few raised eyebrows. Dread pooled in my stomach, yet I pressed on. She's a persona, real person. And if you allow your focus to remain only on profit and appearances, you will be complicit in the culture of neglect that almost cost her everything. In that tense silence, a hand gripped my shoulder. It was the executive, her expression one of gratitude and urgency. "We need to be better," she said, her voice breaking slightly under the weight of the truth. I turned my gaze back to the assembly as confused expressions crossed many faces. Perhaps they were beginning to reconsider their stance, to reckon with the fragility of life beyond profit margins and quarterly reports, but before anyone could respond, a phone rang sharply, cutting through the tension like glass underfoot. The executive next to me answered, her voice suddenly shifting to one of alarm. "What? She's coded? Send me the details now." Panic washed over me, a tidal wave of dread as my heart slammed against my ribs. Catherine was fighting for her life. And as the executive hung up, I held my breath, trembling at the precipice of a truth I could feel lurking just outside of reach. "She's not stable," the executive whispered, her face torn with fear. In that moment, a small flicker of hope wrestled with the shadows of despair, teasing at the edges of possibility. But as I looked around the room, weighing the burden of their guilt against the weight of my heart, I dreaded the possibility that we might not be able to save her after all. The air felt electric, suffused with raw emotion as the room shifted from idle chatter to a palpable tension that felt like a living entity. I could hardly bear to look into the faces of the executives, once so distant, now morphed into something almost human, their impervious facades cracking ever so slightly under the weight of a life hanging in the balance. The executive who had delivered the news stood frozen, her eyes filled with unshed tears. I could see the internal battle waging within her, a part of her that wanted to retreat into corporate immunity and another that clung desperately to her compassion. I wanted to reach out to her, to tell her that it was okay, to remind her that humanity still existed even in the sterile walls of this boardroom, but just as I opened my mouth to speak, a voice from the sidelines interrupted. "Can we have some decorum, please?" It was Sophie again, her tone clipped and devoid of warmth, as if Catherine's very existence were a stain on the pristine agenda they had prepared for the meeting. "Decorum?" I snapped, heat blazing through my cheeks. What good is decorum when a life is on the line? What good are your quarterly reports if they come at the cost of a person's well-being? A murmur of dissent rippled through the gathering, but it felt hollow. The battle lines were drawn, and it was becoming increasingly clear that we were split between those who saw Catherine as a woman deserving help and those who merely viewed her as an obstacle in their path toward success. I clenched my fists, feeling a simmering anger rising within me. Were they really so blind? I had to do something, anything before that flicker of hope extinguished entirely. I turned to the executive beside me. "You said we need to be better. We can't just stand by and do nothing. We have to act, to rally around her." But then, the executive I'd been relying on faltered, her gaze falling to the ground. "You don't understand." Her voice was barely a whisper, but it cut through me like glass. "It's not that simple. There are policies, regulations. We can't just intervene without a plan." My heart sank. The bureaucracy that surrounded every aspect of this company was suddenly blocking our every effort to fight for Catherine. What plan? You mean waiting? Letting her fade away into forgotten headlines? No, my voice cracked, choked by the emotion I could barely contain. I squeezed my eyes shut, allowing the pain to wash over me. How had it come to this? But at that moment, a small voice broke through the chaos, one I had almost forgotten amidst the rising tide of anxiety. "We shouldn't let her be alone. Can someone at least be there for her? The receptionist, who had accompanied me, spoke timidly from the back. Her eyes were wide with genuine concern, a raw vulnerability that seemed out of place in this sleek boardroom filled with suits and power. In that instant, I felt a rush of gratitude wash over me. A glimmer of hope sparked. Perhaps we could turn this around together. I stepped forward, looking back at the executives. Can we send someone? Anyone? I'll go if I need to, but she shouldn't have to face this alone. There was a hesitancy among them as they weighed the options, but I could see the tiniest adjustments of their expressions, the spark of humanity beginning to poke through their polished veneers. Perhaps it was the plea in my voice, or the raw sincerity of the receptionist's words, but maybe this room full of corporate giants wasn't a lost cause after all. Suddenly, the executive who had first brought the news cleared her throat. I can go. Her voice was steadier now, conviction breathing life into each word. I'll go to the hospital. A chorus of murmurs erupted around the table, some supportive, others doubtful, and I fought against the rising tide of panic that threatened to engulf us all again. This isn't enough, I cried, desperation pouring from my soul. She needs more than sympathy. She needs advocates, people who are willing to push for her in ways that, at that moment, a sob broke out across the table, and all heads turned to the source. It was a junior executive, a newcomer who had fallen silent throughout the meeting. She sat there, her face crumpled in despair. I used to clean houses, like her, she stammered. I know what it's like to be invisible, to feel like you're not worth saving. Every pair of eyes shifted toward her, the weight of her words crashing through the barriers that had been organized to keep us tethered to policies and protocols. Slowly, her voice began to rise, and she continued, we can't only talk about her. We should organize a support system. We should all stand with her. That simple statement rippled through the atmosphere like a fresh breeze cutting through smoke. I felt my heart race. Could it be? Yet just as optimism began to envelop me, another sudden interruption caught us off guard. The executive who had rushed out earlier re-entered, his face ashen and grave. It's worse than we thought. They're prepping for an emergency procedure. Ashes gone into shock. Each word sliced through the hopes we had begun to build. I could see the breath-leaving faces around the table, the grayness of despair creeping in yet again. The fight felt futile, and I suddenly questioned if we could save her at all, but deep down, something inside me cracked open wider in defiance, a fierce need to act and not to surrender to despair. No, I whispered, my voice firm and unwavering. We won't let her be another casualty in this world. We'll fight for Catherine. We have to. And as a collective gasp echoed in the room, I realized I had declared more than a sentiment. In that moment I had reignited a fire among us. Hope shimmered in the air, more tangible than before, but lurking in the depths was the chilling doubt that perhaps our best efforts would still not be enough. Desperation danced with determination, and as I stood in the middle of it all, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that the truest battle was just beginning. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung heavily in the air as I navigated the labyrinthine corridors of the hospital, each step echoing the urgency thumping in my chest. Moments ago, faces that straddled the line between human and corporate had sparked with the embers of compassion, and now, as I approached the room where Catherine lay, that flame felt all too fragile. The receptionist had opted to stay behind, a quiet strength radiating from her as she entrusted the responsibility to me. The small gesture of support bolstered me, yet I could sense the weight of every decision pressing down, threatening to suffocate the fragile glimmer of hope we'd fought so hard to nurture. The nurse on duty, her face obscured by a mask, glanced up as I entered. You must be the representative. She nodded towards the curtain-draped area where Catherine was, her tone clinical but not unkind. Yes, I replied, my heart pounding so loudly I could hardly focus. How is she? The nurse hesitated. Her eyes softened as she gestured for me to follow. She's stable for now, but we're monitoring her closely. She reacted well, intensified the news of her circumstances. Shock can do strange things to a person's heart. As she guided me to Catherine's bedside, I caught a glimpse of her frail form. The beeping of machines melded into a subtle symphony of despair, and my breath hitched in my throat at the sight of her. Catherine, once so full of spirit, now appeared small and lost among the tangled sheets and wires that illuminated her stillness against the stark white backdrop of the room. Can I talk to her? I barely managed to whisper, my voice laced with vulnerability. The nurse nodded, stepping back to allow me a moment alone. I took a deep breath, summoning every ounce of courage to approach Catherine's side. The machines beeped steadily, yet in this cocoon of quiet, her breathing felt too fragile, a reminder of how perilous her situation truly was. "Hey, Catherine," I murmured, my voice breaking as I reached out to brush a loose strand of hair from her forehead. "It's me. I'm here." There was a flicker of recognition in her closed eyelids, though it didn't pull her from the fog of unconsciousness. "You're not alone," I continued, not quite believing the words myself. "We're fighting for you. I promise we won't let you slip away. Please, just hold on." Time felt suspended in that moment, stretched thin and taut. I prayed for anything to convey the hope the others and I had worked so hard to ignite in that boardroom. I believed, wholeheartedly, that kindness could do more than crack facades, it could pave the way to salvation, but just as I felt that slight tightening of hope blossoming in my chest, a nurse re-entered, disrupting the fragile peace. Her expression was pained as she checked Catherine's vitals. "I need to monitor her," she said firmly, casting a glance my way. "You'll have to step outside for a moment, just a little longer," I pleaded, desperation rising. "Please, she needs to hear someone cares. It's not your presence that's needed right now," she responded gently but firmly, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. "The calmness matters, too." I'm sorry that I stepped back reluctantly, a heavy heart trailing after me as I exited the room, feeling helpless and isolated in that sterile hallway. The weight of reality pressed against my chest like an iron shroud. How had we let it get this far? How had we let someone like Catherine feel so invisible? The fluorescent lights buzzed lightly overhead, and I sunk into the plastic chair outside her door. I glanced down at my phone, tethered to me like a lifeline, but the screen remained still, devoid of updates. How could I bring her back to the world that had long forgotten her? As I wrestled with uncertainty and fear, I felt a gentle hand rest on my shoulder. It was the junior executive, the one who had spoken out bravely in that meeting. Her eyes were wide, the horror of what lay behind the curtain evident in their shimmering depths. "I had to come," she said softly, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't stop thinking about her. About us and how we treated her like she meant less than nothing." That I nodded, that sinking sense of camaraderie fusing our hearts together, our shared purpose igniting the small spark of hope against the oppressive darkness. "But what do we do now?" I asked, my voice laced with anguish. "We're just a band of misfits trying to fight against a system that doesn't care." "How can we be enough, together?" she said, her voice steady. "We can advocate for her, rally everyone who cares. We can show her that she doesn't have to fight alone. There are others who could help." Before I could respond, however, the nurse emerged from Catherine's room, her face grave once again. "You need to prepare yourselves," she warned, her demeanor shifting from mechanical professionalism to something warmer but rife with concern. "She's showing signs of distress. It's more serious than we anticipated." My heart plummeted at her words, the weight of fear crashing over us like a tidal wave. "Is she going to be okay?" I found myself pleading, every ounce of desperation coiling my voice tightly. The nurse simply shook her head, her eyes filled with sympathy. "We can only do so much. You'll need to brace yourselves for whatever outcome is coming." But know that before she could finish, another commotion erupted at the end of the hallway, and our heads turned to find an older man, panting and frantic. His eyes searched the faces of the onlookers, his presence radiating urgency that ignited a new thread of panic coursing through me. "I'm her father," he gasped, tears streaming freely down his face. "Where is my daughter? I need to see her. Please." The world contracted around my heart, a raw ache piercing deep within as the implications of his arrival twisted my thoughts into a knot. The very man who had vanished from Catherine's life and left her to toil alone was now with a singular knock of fate poised to re-enter her world at its most fragile moment. In that instant, I realized, with a fear that gripped me with icy fingers, that this unpredictable revelation might change everything. Our mission to save Catherine had just become infinitely more complicated. What lay ahead was shrouded in uncertainty, and the jagged lines separating salvation from despair blurred dangerously in those raw moments of truth. The antiseptic air swirled around me, suffocating and heavy, as I watched the frantic man push through the last barrier to reach Catherine's room. My heart hesitated, caught in a web of regret and confusion. He was her father, the very person who had distanced himself from her life when she needed him most. The way he clutched at his chest as he gasped for breath spoke volumes about a lifetime of choices and abandonment. The junior executive beside me stepped back, visibly shaken. Her eyes darted from me to the nurse attending to the new arrival, uncertain of how to process this unexpected upheaval. Emotions twisted like a frayed rope within me, pulling in various directions: anger at a parent who had failed her, concern for Catherine, and an insatiable fear of what this could mean for everything we had fought for. I found my voice barely above a whisper, the mere thought of Catherine's father being by her side at this critical moment sending a wave of nausea through me. "Can he be allowed in?" The nurse shot a look toward the man, her gaze softening as she weighed the gravity of the situation. "Let's see if he can keep his composure during this time. If he creates more disturbance than support, we may need to reconsider." I felt torn, the clash of emotions creating a visceral turmoil within me. He caused her pain, but he might also be her only tether to the world that could save her now. Yet, what if he faltered? What if he broke under the pressure, further dismantling the semblance of courage we tried so hard to muster? Before I could voice my concerns, the nurse beckoned the father towards Catherine's room again, and we held our breaths. I leaned closer to my companion. What if he hurts her all over again? What if she can't bear to see him? "Those are questions that can only be answered once we allow them to meet," she replied, her voice laced with uncertainty, but a vulnerability lingered in her tone reminiscent of my own fears. We waited, hearts colliding against the uncertainty that enveloped us. The nurse disappeared behind the curtain, leaving us cocooned in our own shared apprehension. Moments stretched long and elastic, time seeming to expand infinitely as the beeping of machines played a morose symphony in the background. Then, I caught the faint quiver of voices. Alcohol-soaked murmurs of urgency and desperation penetrated through the fabric of the curtain. Each word felt like an invasive probe into the fragile bond Catherine and I had tried to construct. "What the hell do you know about being a father?" Catherine's voice broke through, sharp and defiant yet tinged with pain. "You left when I needed you. You can't just stroll back in like it's all okay." I winced at her words, the rawness echoing painfully deep within me. A flicker of hope and fear danced in my chest. Could this confrontation serve as a catalyst for real change, or would it spiral her deeper into despair? "Just listen to me, Cat. I made mistakes, but I came back." His pleading voice was a sharp contrast to her raw vitriol, laced with guilt, a flavorless bomb stitched awkwardly over years of neglect. I turned to my companion, who was now gripping the chair tightly, her knuckles white. "What if this breaks her?" "We can't stop it," she said softly, almost ashamed. "But we can't be far. We need to be ready for whatever happens next." As the argument escalated, I felt helpless against the tide of emotional upheaval, longing to march in, to interject, but what good would it do? Would my presence be an anchor or a burden in that storm? Little did I know, a sudden outburst echoed from beyond the curtain, shattering the murmurs like glass. "She saved me." The words rang out with an intensity that pulled at my heart. Catherine, she was the reason I came here. She was always by my side, even when I didn't deserve it. A sheer shock flooded through me, my breath hitched as I processed the emotional currents swirling all around. Seconds ticked by like tiny lifetimes, with each heartbeat echoing the fragility of this newfound revelation. The lights above flickered in response to the charged atmosphere, almost as if the universe itself was oscillating between hope and despair. Desperation clutched at my throat, realizing that this could truly be Catherine's moment, one where her father might recognize the courage shed embodied while he slipped away. the nurse re-emerged, her eyes wide, but she was silent. It felt like a warning. The intensity behind her gaze disrupted my focus, my heart racing at whatever awaited us behind the curtain. "Would you two come in?" she finally said, ushering us into the room. Panic surged through me as I stepped inside, preparing to bear witness to whatever emotional fallout awaited us. The sight was overwhelming. A frail Catherine, her face twisted with rage and hurt, was confronted by her father's tear-streaked face, pleading for forgiveness standing under the bright hospital lights. I stood frozen, every bit of my resolve in question, all hope oscillating on the knife edge of uncertainty. In that moment, the contents of my heart teetered precariously on the brink of revelation. With one confessional exchange, everything could change, grounding us firmly in vulnerability, but also catapulting us towards the chaos of unknown consequences. In a single heartbeat, the burden of acknowledging the truth could unleash a torrent of pain or emerge as a bridge toward healing. Would Catherine embrace this impending revelation, or would it lead her down a darker path, weaving through the shadows of betrayals anew? The air pulsed with tension, and as Catherine turned to me, her eyes aflame, I braced for the fallout where hope and fear intertwined, the quiet promise of change rippling through an uncertain moment. The sterile room felt claustrophobic, an invisible weight pressing down as I stood motionless. Catherine's gaze bore into me, a cacophony of emotions flickering across her face: anger, disbelief, and even a hint of vulnerability. My stomach knotted with dread and anticipation. The fragile thread of hope seemed to dance briefly in the air, only to be anchored by the shadows of our past. "What do you mean she saved you?" Catherine's voice trembled slightly as she studied her father, searching for the sincerity beneath the layers of hurt that had long defined their relationship. Her father flinched, the sharpness of her question piercing through him. "Cat, I mean it. Every time I stumbled, every bad decision, you were my reason to try to be better. When I came back to town, I knew you were here, the one thing that kept me from spiraling even further." His own agony mirrored hers, a tumultuous storm swirling behind his eyes, but Catherine turned away, her emotions threatening to overwhelm her. "Who are you trying to fool? You walked away and didn't look back. You don't get to claim me now." The words were a weapon, sharp and painful, glancing off a man whose defenses had crumbled long ago. I yearned to step in, to offer support, but I remained at the threshold, paralyzed by the unpredictable dynamics unfolding before me. Somewhere beneath her rage, I sensed a glimmer of sadness battling for space, and it broke my heart a little more with each harsh syllable she uttered. The nurse lingered near the doorway, her expression grave. She had witnessed countless emotional confrontations in her years at the hospital, yet this one felt different. There was a palpable energy in the room, a desperate yearning for truth intertwined with unhealed scars. "Maybe you don't know how much she means to me," her father insisted, desperate to fight for their bond. "Catherine, don't you see? I made mistakes, but I want to make things right." "Yes, because it's so easy to just fix everything with words." She swallowed hard, the force of her anguish morphing into something more subdued, laden with confusion. "If you could turn back time, would you really choose me?" His voice cracked, vulnerability spilling over the edges. "Yes. I would take every second I lost and give it back to you in an instant. But I can't change the past. I can only try to be the man you deserve now." The room fell silent. My heart raced, an involuntary drumbeat calling me to action. I could see Catherine's defenses crumbling, the walls she had so fiercely built now tinged with doubt. And in that moment of hesitation, I caught a flicker of something else: hope. But it was quickly overshadowed by a sudden commotion outside the room, the loud clatter of rolling carts and hurried footsteps pulling my focus away. "What's happening?" I murmured, stealing a glance toward the door. The nurse's expression narrowed, her demeanor shifting from compassionate to authoritative in an instant. As she stepped closer to the doorway, I could hear snippets of conversation, urgent whispers, conflicting orders flying through the air. "Code blue in room 24. A voice echoed, slicing through the tension with a sterile edge of alarm. My breath caught in my throat as dread filled the room like a thick fog. Catherine's father turned, confusion flashing across his features, his emotions as unsteady as the tremors vibrating beneath the surface. The heart monitor next door began to emit a frantic alarm, an ominous cry that sent all of us into action. The nurse dashed away, her focus shifted entirely to respond to the crisis, and I felt a panic rise within me. The reality of their moment was being stolen, the potential for reconciliation eclipsed by the brutality of life's fragility. Catherine, I hesitated, unsure how to approach her, the imminent chaos threatening our fragile moment. But she suddenly turned to me, tears brimming in her eyes as fear spiked through her voice. What if that was someone else's father? What if each moment counts, and I'm just stuck with "Don't think like that"? You're not stuck. You still have a choice, I urged, fighting to keep the fear from overtaking her. You can reclaim any of this for yourself. Her gaze flickered back to her father, a man unrecognizable in his grief and desperation. But what if I can't forgive him? What if I can't even talk to him without feeling broken all over again? I don't know, I admitted, taking a step forward, filling space with warmth rather than pressure. But you've faced so much already. You've been braver than anyone could ever expect. You can take this moment, it's yours, Catherine. No one can take that from you. A flicker of realization crossed her face, a glimmer of strength surging forth against the backdrop of uncertainty. But as the commotion intensified around us, a new nurse rushed in, calling for help, eyes bright with urgency. We need you in room 24. It's critical. Now. She barked, her frantic tone slicing like a knife through the air, and just like that, the moment between Catherine and her father unraveled, thrust into the chaos of the unknown once more. Answer me. Catherine cried to her father, her voice spiraling into desperation as she grappled with her turbulent emotions. Why should I believe you now? He stepped forward, eyes wide, an ocean of fears pooling deep within them. Because I'm here. I'm fighting for you. And I'll stand by you, no matter what it takes. Before she could respond, the nurse turned, dragging my attention with her towards the alarming sounds echoing from room 24. You stay with her. She needs you. Catherine's confusion seemed to deepen, mixed with fear and uncertainty, but in the flurry of unexpected motions, I could already hear the sound of fate shifting beneath us. With the world spinning into chaos, I braced myself, fully aware that at any moment, everything we hoped for might slip through our fingers like sand. And in the depths of my heart, a resounding truth took shape: the strength we needed would not simply be a matter of choice, it would demand resilience amidst heartache, and perhaps, just perhaps, open wounds could lead to pathways of healing in ways we never believed possible. As the sounds of commotion grew closer, an unsettling revelation washed over me. The delicate nature of our truths was poised against the fragility of existence. Fate was no longer a mere observer, it was a silent partner in our unfolding story, ready to flip the script at a moment's notice, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something monumental was just on the verge of being revealed. The fluorescent lights hummed as the chaos around us surged, establishing a frantic rhythm to the unspoken apprehension packing the air. Catherine remained frozen, torn between the gnashing emotions of her past and the torrent of uncertainty crashing down upon us. As the urgency of the situation escalated, I dared to glance out the doorway, where nurses and orderlies rushed past, their faces taut with a seriousness that shook me to my core. I could feel the weight of dread pressing heavier on my heart with each hurried step I witnessed. The spectrum of life and death loomed just beyond the threshold, a poignant reminder of how quickly everything could unravel. Catherine, I whispered, trying to pull her focus back from the escalating noise that threatened to drown out the thin thread of connection we had found together. I'm here. Let's not lose sight of what's happening between us. Her eyes, still brimming with uncertainty, shifted towards me, sparked by a flicker of defiance, a spark that mirrored the shifting tide within her. In the fragile moments where sorrow and ambivalence collided, I sensed that hope was still alive. What if this is it? She rasped, her voice trembling. What if I never get the chance to say what I need to say? The anguish was palpable, an echo of a countless number of heart-wrenching goodbyes. Then let's make this moment matter, no matter what happens next, I replied, my heart urging me to offer every ounce of courage I could muster. but just before Catherine could respond, a small commotion stirred at my side. The nurse who fired the urgent orders, motioning for help down the corridor, now returned with a stooped figure trailing closely behind her, a cleaning lady, disheveled and weary, dragging a mop along the floor. She stopped in her tracks upon seeing Catherine, her expression shifting instantly from focused determination to one of concern, eyebrows knitting together in sympathetic recognition. "Catherine?" The lady spoke quietly, her voice gentle yet piercing through the layers of turmoil. "Is that you?" Catherine's gaze darted toward her, confusion etched into her tired features. "Do I know you?" The woman hesitated, eyes glistening with unshed tears. "We had a connection once. You might not remember, I used to clean the hospital when you were small. Your father loved you so much, you know." Catherine took a half step back, her walls pressing tighter around her heart, the shattered pieces of her past laid bare before this unexpected stranger. "What does that mean?" "He could have been there. He chose to leave. I know it's hard to understand," the woman continued, her voice trembling with compassion. "But people are complicated. We wear masks to protect ourselves, even from those we love. I've seen him never stop thinking about you, no matter how far he strayed. There's a light in him when he talks about you, a glimmer that remains strong even when storm clouds gather." The cleaning lattice words hung thickly in the air, mingling with Catherine's apprehensive breaths. I saw the flicker of doubt dancing across her features, and it broke my heart to witness as her defenses faltered in the wake of this stranger's poignant honesty. "What would you know?" Catherine challenged, anger mixing with pain. "You see him all fall apart like everyone else." The cleaning woman stepped closer cautiously, her heart evident as she laid a careful hand on Catherine's arm. "Because I see him in more than a moment, honey. I've mopped the floors while he cried. I've witnessed him deteriorate on his worst nights, thinking of you as he worked to survive each day just like the rest of us. It's not as simple as leaving or staying, it's about how deeply we choose to care amid our failures." The truth resounded painfully between us, reverberating through the silence, but before Catherine could reply, the alarm from room 24 rang out again, sharper now, spreading a renewed sense of urgency through the atmosphere. My heart jumped as I saw the fear trip through Catherine's eyes, the collective dread suddenly tightening its grip on her. "What if something happens?" she whispered, a ghost of a plea escaping her lips, vulnerability blooming anew. "What if I really lose him again?" My thoughts raced alongside hers, every heartbeat echoing the plane of emotional complexity we all faced. There was nothing I could say to erase the echoes of pain nor silence the alarms reverberating through our lives. But I stepped closer, closing the distance, wrapping my fingers gently around hers, squeezing tightly. "You are stronger than you think, Catherine. Whatever happens, don't forget that the beauty of life sometimes embraces chaos." As we held onto each other, the fear igniting between us began to shift, our joined hands a fragile lifeline against the storm. Yet, the reality was sharp. Fear and uncertainty are often intertwined. Whispering in the midst of recovery, "Okay," she breathed, drawing strength from my presence, but a sudden commotion erupted nearby, silencing everything for a split second before I realized it was her father, now at the edge of the chaos. The desperation in his eyes was akin to our own, a living reflection of lost time fighting to reclaim a fleeting connection. "Where is Catherine?" he shouted, desperation clawing through his voice as he battled past the nurses, searching for that flicker of lost hope. "I need to find her." For a moment, everything stood still, and Catherine's eyes darted back to me, a storm of emotions crashing against the shores of uncertainty. This could change everything. Her heart trembled at the precipice of a decision that loomed like a wave ready to crash. And as I stared into her eyes, a new urgency sparked, one that proclaimed this moment had only just begun breathing its life into the unrelenting tide of fate. But just before I could respond, a nurse retrieved the cleaning lady from the foreground, hastily pulling her away, whispering in urgent tones. Within moments, they disappeared down the corridor, their figures swallowed by the tides of heartbreak and hope, leaving us stranded at the brink of revelation, receding into the depths of our intertwined destinies. Catherine's uncertainty morphed into a burning intensity as she watched her father pushing closer through the turmoil, and yet, there we stood on the brink of discovery, Our world still hanging in a precarious balance filled with unanswered questions hungering for resolution. The chaos enveloped us, and before I could fully grasp its enormity, my breath hitched as a shocking revelation settled over my heart, a truth humming dangerously from that very corridor that we were about to break or be broken. The fluorescent lights flickered ominously overhead as the air thickened with a tension that felt almost palpable. I could feel Catherine's heartbeat racing beneath my fingers, a fragile thread woven with the weight of everything unspoken between us. Each echo of her father's frantic calls pierced through the chaos, ricocheting within the sterile walls of the hospital like a desperate prayer searching for a response. "Catherine," I finally managed, my voice trembling just a shade above a whisper. "You need to decide if you want to talk to him. This moment it could change everything." Torn between the fear of vulnerability and the ache of regret, her gaze flitted between her father's anxious figure and the cocoon of safety we had built, fragile yet radiant in its intimacy. "He abandoned us when I needed him most," she choked, an ember of anger mingling with the tears pooling in her eyes. What could possibly make this any different? Perhaps nothing at all. Or perhaps everything. My heart ached for her uncertainty, for the shadows of the past that loomed larger than any flicker of hope. "You deserve to find your truth, even if the journey is painful. You're not alone in this." The air shifted as she weighed my words, her inner battle evident, a tempest raging beneath the surface of her resolve. I watched helplessly as the line between anger and longing blurred, and just when it seemed she would take that crucial step toward her father, a chilling scream erupted from at the far end of the corridor, followed by a sudden rush of footsteps. What was that? Catherine gasped, her hands tightening in mine that I turned instinctively toward the sound, my heart pounding in tandem with hers. The nurses at the station huddled together, their expressions muted and grave as they murmured to one another hurriedly, but moments later, one darted toward us, urgency overtaking her features. "There's been an emergency in room 24. We need to clear this area," she instructed, almost breathless. "Please step back." As we moved aside, the chaos wrapped us tighter in its grip. Just like that, another wave of uncertainty crashed over Catherine, and I could feel it threaten to pull her under. Her father was almost visible through the whirl of bodies, desperation radiating from him like an electric pulse, but he still seemed so far away, as if a chasm had opened between them, swallowing any chance they had for connection. "He might not be there when this is over," Catherine whispered suddenly, her voice trembling with the weight of everything unsaid. "What if he doesn't wait?" Before I could respond, the nurse who had approached us rushed away, and a new voice emerged, a male voice, calm but laced with urgency. "Calling all available doctors and specialists to room 24, we have a code blue." The gravity of those words fell like a lead weight between us. Every moment stretched painfully as realization dawned, their immensity stark against the reality we were confronting. Someone's life hung in the balance, echoing a parallel to the choice Catherine faced, the fear of losing another connection looming ominously over her heart. "Please, let's go." I pulled at her gently, urging her to move toward her father, but she hesitated, uncertainty clouding her expression. "You can decide how you want to face this. You don't have to do it alone." Catherine took a shaky breath, her resolve snapping into place. Her father's cries seemed to pierce through the chaos, igniting a spark of determination within her. The corridor was filled with flashing lights and rushing bodies, but in that instance, all that mattered was the flicker of hope that we might finally face our past. As we maneuvered through the maze of frantic caretakers, a wave of panic washed over me as I felt the ground shift beneath our feet, a series of muffled voices colliding as a group of doctors burst through the double doors of room 24. The energy around us changed, the air thickening with apprehension as professionals pushed past one another, every face a mask of purpose lasting fleetingly until giving way to a more desperate expression. "What's happening?" Catherine cried out, the tightness in her throat constricting as tears filled her eyes once more. Her uncertainty bristled with an electric charge of anxiety, and then there it was, a sudden, breathless moment of clarity. "Is it my father?" I felt her tremble as I steadied her with a firm grip, the wave of panic choking us both. "Well, find out, Catherine." Together, through the corner of my eye, I noticed a familiar face, a doctor rushing by with a look of grim determination. Suddenly, Everything else paled against the urgency of that moment. "Wait!" I called out, desperation threading my voice as I caught their attention. "What's happening in there?" In that fleeting silence, the doctor paused, casting a glance back. "We're working to stabilize him. It's critical." The gravity of the words felt like a punch to the gut, leaving us standing at the precipice of possibility, teetering between hope and despair. Catherine's breath hitched, and as she clutched my hand tighter, the connection between us crackled with an intensity that threatened to unravel everything she had known. "I can't lose him again." Her eyes, wild with fear and yearning, bore into mine with an intensity that twisted my heart. "That I won't let you go through this alone," I vowed, but her expression shifted, full of this relentless tide of emotions, and I knew the past had come roaring back, and we were caught in its grip. Then, unexpectedly, through the medley of voices, I heard something I didn't anticipate. A whisper, quiet yet maddeningly distinct, curling around the edges of everything unsteady. "He's been searching for you, Catherine. He thought you didn't want him." The gasp that escaped her lips hung in the air, an electric force igniting the chaos. Time seemed to stand still as I inhaled slowly, the truth settling upon us both like a slow, creeping fog. We were unearthing secrets long buried, unveiling a past that threatened to reshape our fragile understanding of forgiveness and belonging. And as my heart thundered in my chest, I suddenly felt the walls around us constrict. Little room we had built condensed around the reality that loomed heavy with truth, struggling to navigate our fears in a world where nothing seemed predictable. But the urgency pressed on, and just then, a resounding sound echoed behind USA's sudden off-key wail of a child, harmonizing pitifully with the tension surrounding us. In that fragile moment, it felt like the veil between hope and grief frayed, exposing us to the chaotic nature of life. A shrill reminder that some doors were unraveling even as others were opening. The corridor felt alive then, thick with all that remained unspoken, and as Catherine's eyes welled with tears, I realized this was more than about reconnection. It was about healing the wounds that time had inflicted, and in the distance, the urgency grew. We could either stand firm, hand in hand ready to face the storm, or succumb to the tides of fear that threatened to tear us apart once more. But as we stood on that precipice, caught between love and uncertainty, I couldn't shake the heavy feeling that this was just the beginning, the darkest hour before a shift that could change everything. And then, just as suddenly, another commotion erupted down the hall, shattering the fragile hope we shared, a voice rising high above the din. "Get them out of the way. Now!" In that instant, I felt everything shift beneath us, a realization that would echo far beyond these walls, lodging itself deep into my soul. The past clutched tightly within our grasp. Could we bear to face it, or would our hearts fracture under the strain of choices yet to come? As I stood there, heart racing and breath caught in my throat, I felt the world around me condense into a singular moment of truth. Catherine's pain resonated deeply within me, a silent battle raging in her chest as fear clashed with desperate longing for reconciliation. This was not just about her father, it was about every moment of her life that had brought us here, each thread woven into a tapestry marked with loss. And now, a flicker of hope. "But he left me," she murmured, the vulnerability in her voice striking like a blade through the chaos. "How can I trust him again?" I could see the conflict reflected in her gaze. The urgency of the situation pushed us, urging connection even as the shadows of the past clawed at her soul. "Catherine," I said, stepping closer, cautious yet firm, "forgiveness is a bridge we can rebuild with time and honesty. You owe it to yourself to consider this, no matter how painful it feels to open up again." A life hung in the balance somewhere just beyond the curtain, her father tirelessly battling his own ghosts in the next room. As panic buzzed through the air, a nurse strode past, her urgency palpable, and I felt Catherine's grip tighten around mine. "I can't lose him again," she breathed, anguish unraveling in her words. "No one can take anyone from you again, Catherine." "Not unless you let them," I reassured her, watching as her resolve began to crack, glimmers of determination weaving through her expression. It flickered like the fluorescent lights above, waning and waxing but alive. Suddenly, every eye turned towards the door as it swung open. A doctor emerged, brows knitted together, phone in hand. I could see the uncertainty shadowing his features, and my stomach lurched with dread. In that moment, it hit met our lives each suspended on a precipice of connection, emotion hanging just out of reach. "We've managed to stabilize him for now," he began, his voice serious yet underlined with a flicker of hope, "but it's going to be critical for him to see family." My eyes bounced between Catherine and her father, a rush of energy coursing through me. "A possibility, fragile yet potent." As the weight of those words settled in, a warmth began to bloom in Catherine's expression, held back by remembrance but also by the potential of understanding. A moment of silence enveloped us as she stood at the confluence of decision, every heartbeat echoing the significance of where we found ourselves, and then, as if answering an unspoken prayer, her father appeared just beyond the threshold, a tentative figure shrouded in the fragility of hope. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the air crackled with the weight of lost years and tentative courage. "Cat," he whispered, his voice tremulous, raw. "I was never gone on purpose. I thought you'd be better off without me." The vulnerability in his words dropped heavily into the space between them. Catherine clasped her hands together, trembling. "You broke me, Dad. How could I trust you again?" The yearning in her voice sliced through the air like a desperate plea for understanding. "Because I'm here now," he implored, stepping forward. "Because I'll spend the rest of my days proving it to you. I never stopped caring, I was just lost." There was something genuine in his tone, something that cracked through the walls she had so carefully erected. "You don't have to forgive me today, but can you give me a chance at least to try?" Every ounce of tension burst forth as Catherine's breath hitched, her gaze refusing to leave his face. I don't know how her plea lingered like a tenuous thread, weaving hope with uncertainty. "I know," he said gently, drawing nearer, longing for the bond they had once shared. "And no one expects you to know how. Just know I want to make it right. I want to be part of your world if you'll let me." They were standing on the precipice of transformation, a generational hurt held tight, now woven into something new. The noise of the hospital faded into the background, eclipsed by this fragile moment full of potential. I could see it in both their eyes, each flashing with the dawning awareness that healing required not just a reconnection beyond the hurt but a willingness to embrace vulnerability. The air hummed as Catherine bit her lip, uncertainty mixing with something deeper, a desire for connection. "I don't know if I can," she whispered, the most honest acknowledgement of her struggle. "Start small." I stepped forward, my heart racing as the words spilled out. "Maybe it begins with a simple truth, one shared moment. You can start from that spark and let it grow. But you have to choose to take that first step." Catherine turned to me, eyes wide, the myriad emotions swirling within her reflected back in mine, but they began to settle into something unshakably, a resolve that I hadn't seen before. "I want to," she trembled, the resolve threading through her tone. "I just don't know how." "Then just be present," I urged, the frailty of the moment giving way to the burgeoning strength I sensed in her. "Let it be real, however it may unfold." It was then that the cracks began to mend, piece by piece, as she stepped forward into the light of their shared past. "Okay," she breathed, and just like that, the weight of all that loomed ahead shifted again. The fragility of life hung suspended in that moment, suspended within their gaze, the space brimming with potential to create lasting change. As the walls of disappointment crumbled, she took a step towards her father, and I heard the soft murmur of a heart reconnecting, one stitch at a time. My heart swelled with elation. I could feel the gravity of their experiences weaving into something that could no longer be contained, an acknowledgement of love amidst brokenness, and the tender seed of forgiveness seeded once more. "Dad," Catherine whispered, her voice raw but unwavering. "I'm not sure if I can forgive you yet. But I want to try. I want to begin again." "I'll be here," he said, hope igniting between them, a bridge spanning the abyss of their shared past. As I stepped back, my heart soared, the glowing interplay of healing and connection wrapped around us, each moment precious as they embraced the journey ahead. I knew there would be challenges, battles to face together. But for now, they had taken the first step toward reconciliation, and in that universe of possibility, a new chapter began to unfold, and in the echo of their embrace, I felt a whisper of fate turning, the stirring of lives intertwining on a celestial journey toward healing. Just as the room illuminated with hope, I took a deep breath, realizing the final, profound truth. In the end, it was not just about forgiveness or lost connections. It was about giving ourselves permission to embrace the storm and find the light, a chance to hold on to life's intricacies, even when everything felt utterly chaotic. As they stood together, trembling yet resolute, a humming in my heart reminded me of the journey we've all traversed as humans. With every heartbeat, my soul echoed a resounding promise that left us profoundly changed, resting in the uncontrollable but beautiful truth: we are irrevocably woven into each other's stories and can rise anew, even from the ashes. Life might be messy, arduous, and unpredictable, but through it all, love and hope will always illuminate the path to healing, whispering that our greatest strength lies in our willingness to connect, to open our hearts, and embrace the journey together. In that tender moment, I realized the most profound truth of all: sometimes, it takes losing everything to find what truly matters: each other.